Hey guys, welcome to Telling the Told and Untold. My name is Tshego. Before we go straight into today's case, I forgot to mention in my last video that there is a case suggestion link in the description box below. So you guys can suggest cases for me. You guys are always suggesting cases, but sometimes I forget to jot them down or I lose them in the mix of everything. So I thought this would be an easier way for me to keep track of all the cases you guys want me to cover. So yeah, if you have any case suggestions, just go to the link in the description box and I'll be able to see them. For today's video, we are going to be talking about the infamous Oscar Pistorius case, and this video does contain themes of domestic abuse. So if that's not something you think that you're interested in watching, then this video probably isn't for you, but you can watch some of my other videos or just wait for my next upload. Oscar Pistorius, full name Oscar Leonard Carl Pistorius, was born on the 22nd of November 1986 to parents Sheila and Henrik Carl William Pistorius. His parents were owners of a zinc mining business, and because of this, their name was very well known, and they were also well off. They had 3 children: Carl, who was born in 1985, followed by Oscar, and then their youngest, Amy, who was born in 1989. Oscar was born without a fibula in either of his legs, and this is when his parents decided to make the difficult decision to have Oscar's legs both amputated below his knee when he was just 11 months. 6 months after getting both his legs amputated, he learned how to walk on fiberglass pegs and took his first pair of prosthetic legs at just 17 months. His parents refused to accept any excuses from him or his siblings, and growing up they always had one rule that they had to abide by, and this was that you can't say I can't. They encouraged Oscar to play various sports, and he did, and when he was just 6 years old, his parents decided to get a divorce, and after this, if I'm not mistaken, he spent most of his time with his mom, but he would occasionally go visit his dad. When Oscar was 15 years old, his mother unfortunately passed away. She was just 42. Apparently, she was misdiagnosed with hepatitis and received the incorrect treatment, and when her condition hadn't improved, after a week, her friend decided to take her to the hospital, and according to this friend, Sheila fought a good fight and she held on as long as she could. Her children went to the hospital and were at her bedside, and literally probably 15 minutes after they went to go see her, she took her last breath. Oscar was really close to his mother, and this really broke him, but he still continued on, and he went to Pretoria Boys High School, and here he played a lot of sports. He did water polo as well as played rugby, and when he was 16, just a year after Sheila passed away in 2003, he unfortunately injured his knee whilst playing rugby. And because of this injury, his doctor suggested that for rehabilitation, he should take on running. And little did either of them know that him taking running as part of his rehabilitation would change his entire life. Just a year later, Oscar competed in his first Paralympics, and he beat the world record in the 100-meter dash. And in June, he was fitted with his first set of carbon fiber flex foot cheetah blades, and this is where he got his nickname, the Blade Runner. As the years went on, Oscar would compete in various competitions, and in June 2007 in Rome, he competed in his first able-bodied competition, and after this, people started raising their eyebrows at him because they thought because of his blades he had a better advantage. And then in 2008 the IAAF Council banned him from able-bodied competitions. However, they did appeal this and he was allowed to compete in able-bodied competitions, and later that summer he won 3 gold medals at the Beijing Paralympics. Over the next few years, Oscar Pistorius' international celebrity was cemented thanks to him being featured in a lot of magazines such as Time, GQ, People, and a lot of people really looked up to him. He was a bachelor, he would go out, he was dating models, things like that. But behind the surface, Oscar did seem to have a lot of trouble following him. In 2009, he was involved in a speedboat accident at the Vaal River, and once authorities got there, they saw like alcohol bottles on the floor, and it was very clear that they were intoxicated when they were driving the speedboat, which is not allowed. And also a couple of months after that, he was arrested for injuring a woman after allegedly slamming a door in her face at a party. Then in 2012, Oscar Pistorius met Reeva Steenkamp through a mutual friend. Reeva was born on the 19th of August 1983 in Cape Town. Her dad was Barry Steenkamp and her mother was June, and Barry had been married before and he had 2 children, and they were fairly older than Reeva, and because of this she was raised as an only child. In her early childhood, the family moved to Port Elizabeth, and there she began her modeling when she was just 15 years old. And after finishing school, she enrolled in a law class at Nelson Mandela University, and in 2005 she graduated with a Bachelor of Laws degree. The same year that she graduated, in 2005, she became a finalist in the Herald Miss Port Elizabeth contest, and then she later became a model and cover girl for the FHM magazine, and she was also the first face of Avon Cosmetics in South Africa. She pursued her career in modeling, obviously throughout her early teens and 20s, and by the early 2000s, she became one of South Africa's most sought out models. She appeared in so many advertisements internationally, including Avon Cosmetics, Toyota, KFC, Cardinal Beer, and Tiger Beer. In 2012, she was a finalist in an adventure reality show called Tropica Island that aired on the 16th of February 2013. Alongside her modeling career, Reeva also worked as a paralegal, and in 2011 she applied for the bar, and she was hoping that by the age of 30 she would qualify as a legal advocate. She was also an enthusiast horse rider. I didn't mention earlier, but her father, Barry, was a horse rider instructor. But unfortunately, when Reeva was in her early 20s, she fell off a horse and broke her back, which left her bedridden for a couple of months, and she had to learn to re-walk. But this literally just didn't stop her, and it just encouraged her more to go after what she really wanted in life. So Oscar and Reeva met through a mutual friend. His name was Justin, and apparently they went for lunch and they hit it off. And I don't know if it was like later that night or a couple of days or weeks later, but Oscar had told Justin that he forgot that he had RSVP'd with a partner for the South African Sports Awards. So Justin had suggested that he go with Reeva, and Oscar he wasn't sure about it because he didn't think that that's something that Reeva would do, like just being adventurous, I guess. But he did decide to ask her, and Reeva said yes, and said that he should give her an hour and a half to get ready. And after this, they went to the red carpet for the South African Sports Award, and this was the first time the couple was pictured together. And yeah, after the event, he told Justin that it was a fantastic date, and afterwards they spoke for literally hours, and the next day they saw each other, and they saw each other every day for the next 6 days until Reeva had to go on an international trip. But once she got back, her and Oscar continued getting to know each other and their relationship. Oscar was planning to spend Christmas with Reeva, like he had planned a whole trip, and then Reeva said that like she just didn't want to go, she wanted to spend some time alone, and she was also spending Christmas with one of her friends. But unfortunately, this friend cancelled on their plans, and after this, Reeva did spend Christmas with Oscar as well as one of his friends and the friend's girlfriend. By the end of January 2013, it had been a couple of months since the couple were first spotted together, and their relationship was growing, and they would go to like events together and be out in public together, and yeah, they were They were dating. They were dating at this point. And then on the 13th of February, there's CCTV footage that shows Reeva driving into the gated community that Oscar lived in just before 6 p.m. in her Mini Cooper. And just 10 minutes later, Oscar arrived driving his white BMW. By 10 p.m., the couple had already eaten dinner and they were getting ready for bed. Oscar had taken off his prosthetic legs and he was watching TV, and and Reeva was doing yoga. And not too long after this, the couple went to bed, and the gift that Reeva had for Oscar was still on the table unopened, just assuming that they were going to open it on Valentine's, which was just the next day. In the early hours of the morning, one of Oscar's neighbors was woken up by 3 loud bangs, and immediately his wife turned to him and asked, like, what was that sound? And he said, I think they were gunshots. He then got up out of bed, went to his balcony just to go see where the banging came from, and this is where he heard screaming, and he decided to go to his neighbor's house to see what was going on. As soon as he got to his neighbor's house, he saw a woman lying on the floor, and she was surrounded by towels and plastics, and she was bleeding, and there was a man next to her on his knees, and he was hysterical. He was crying, and the neighbor said to him, like, I'm a doctor, I can help you in any way. So he went to the woman that was lying on the floor, and he tried to open up her airways, but she showed no signs of life, and he checked for a pulse, but there was nothing. The woman was Reeva, and the man on his knees was Oscar Pistorius. At 19 minutes after 3, Oscar had called a neighbor and asked her to come over and help him. And just a minute after that, he had called a hospital, and he was hysterical. He was crying, he was sobbing. And about 10 minutes after that, police officers and ambulances arrived on the scene. Just 5 minutes before 4 a.m., Oscar called his friend Justin, the one that had introduced him to Reeva, and he was hysterical on the phone, and he said, there's been a terrible accident. Reeva's been shot. I've shot Reeva. The neighbor then takes the phone and says to Justin, it's true, Reeva's been shot. You must come now. Justin immediately got into his car and he drove to Oscar's house, which was in Pretoria, and he was driving from Joburg, which is about a 40-minute drive. And once he got to Oscar's estate, he drove in, and the house was surrounded by ambulances and police vehicles. He tried to see Oscar, but Oscar was in the garage and he was surrounded by police officers, and the front door was open, and he could see Reeva lying on the floor, and she was surrounded by towels and plastic. Whilst Oscar was being detained in the garage, Justin could hear him screaming, I've killed my baba, I've killed my baby, God take me away. So one of the investigative officers went into the garage where Oscar was. Oscar was sitting on a gym bench and he was surrounded by gym equipment. He had his prosthetic legs on as well as shorts, and the shirt that he was wearing was full of blood. So the officer noticed that his hands were clean because Oscar was like crying into his hands. He was hysterical. He was asking God to take him away. And the officer asked him if he had washed his hands, and Oscar said yes, he did, because they were covered in blood. Then the officer asked him, like, do you remember me? Because this was the same officer that had arrested Oscar 4 years earlier for the assault of the woman, and then Oscar said yes. Then the officer asked Oscar what happened, and Oscar said that he thought it was a burglar. On the 14th of February 2013, on Valentine's Day, South Africans woke up to the news that a woman had been killed in Oscar Pistorius' home, believed to be his girlfriend, and he had been arrested. Soon after this, news spread globally, and this would become one of the biggest cases in South Africa. Oscar was taken to the police station, and on the very same day, prosecutors Andrea Johnson and Reginald were assigned to the case. And Johnson remembers that the first question that she had was, why did she not check her? And she remembers there was a time when her and her husband were in bed, and the husband thought that he heard someone, like thought there was a burglar in the house. And the first thing that he did was reach out his hand to check where she was. And she was just like, why would you not check where she is if you think that there's a burglar? Over a year after Reeva was killed, on the 3rd of March 2014, the trial finally began. There was a lot of information that came out during the trial, so I tried to put it in an order that would make sense to you guys, and not necessarily how it came out, and not necessarily the order that it came out in during the trial. I hope that makes sense. Oscar and Reeva's relationship wasn't all chocolates and roses as Oscar made it out to be. So WhatsApp messages between Oscar and Reeva were read out during the trial, and I'm going to read one of the messages that Reeva had sent to Oscar on the 27th of January 2013. The message that she sent was really long, so I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to read some parts of it. So Reeva said, "Today was one of my best friend's engagements, and I wanted to stay longer. I was enjoying myself, but it's over now. You have picked on me incessantly since you got back from Cape Town, and I understand that you are sick, but it's nasty. Yesterday wasn't nice for either of us, but we managed to pull through and communicate well enough to show our care for each other is greater than the drama that attacked us. I was not flirting with anyone today. I feel sick that you suggested that, and you made a scene at the table and made us leave early. I'm scared of you sometimes, and how you snap at me, and how you will react to me." And then on the 8th of February, just a couple of days after she was killed, Reeva said to Oscar, "I can't be attacked by outsiders for dating you and be attacked by you, the one person I deserve protection from." There's a picture I found that demonstrates what happened from Oscar's perspective that night. So I'm going to put it in now and just read to you what Oscar said happened. So Oscar said that the first thing he did was wake up, and then he went onto the balcony to bring in the fan and close the sliding doors, the blinds, and the curtains. After this, he hears a noise in the bathroom. He thinks it's an intruder that has climbed through the window. Then, on his way to the bathroom, Oscar starts screaming for the intruder to get out of his house. He sees the bathroom window is open and fires through the door after hearing a noise inside. Reeva is then hit by 3 rounds. After returning to the bathroom, he sees that Reeva is not in the bed. He then puts on his prosthetic legs and switches on the lights. He opens the locked door by smashing it with a cricket bat, and once he gets inside, he sees that Reeva is still alive, and then he calls for help. After this, he carries her downstairs where he tries to revive her, and she dies in his arms. I should note where Oscar lived, because he did live in an estate, was heavily guarded, high walls, electric fence, security guards, cameras. So a lot of people just thought it was weird that he would think that there's an intruder in the house, seeing how safe the estate is, or like how much security there is. Based on Reeva's injuries and the scene of the crime, it is believed that she was standing in the toilet cubicle when she was hit in the right hip by the first of 4 bullets, and then after this she fell back and was struck in the right arm and the head as she tried to cross her arms to protect herself from the bullets. She was facing the door when Oscar started opening fire. So the captain said that the bullet penetrated and broke the hip bone of the deceased. If the hip bone is broken completely, it causes her to fall down. She would not have been able to stand up. She fell down and moved backwards. The captain then said that the bullet struck her head and broke into 2 fragments, causing extensive damage. Then the second shot missed Reeva, hitting the cubicle instead and causing it to break into pieces, bruising her neck. He could not determine the order of the last 2 shots. After this, Reeva fell on top of the magazine rack in the bathroom in a seated position, from where 1 subsequent bullet missed her before a 4th one hit her in the head and instantly killed her. There are pictures of Reeva's injuries online, and this is because her father insisted that the media publish it so everyone could see what Oscar had done to his daughter. I'm not going to include those pictures in this video because I just don't think that it is appropriate, but if you guys do want to go see those pictures, you can just find them online. I don't think it's that hard, but from the pictures that I saw, her one eye was really bruised. It was black, it was blue. She had like little scars and scratches on her face. Yeah. Then one of Oscar's ex-girlfriends took to the stand, and her name was Samantha Taylor. So Samantha and Oscar met when she was 16 and he was 23 years old at a rugby game. And they just met, and afterwards Oscar sent her a message on Facebook, and they spoke for about a year before he decided to take her out on a date. And her mother remembers when Samantha told her that she's going to finally meet Oscar and they're going out on a date. Her mother was a bit cautious because they had only been talking on Facebook, so she was scared that maybe it wasn't who the person said it was, but it did turn out to be Oscar, and they dated for about 18 months. Samantha says that like her and Oscar, when they first started dating, everything like was good and happy, but Oscar was obsessed with guns and he kept a gun on him at all times, and she would often receive photos of him posing with his guns. And his love for guns and his short temper just really started to scare Samantha. He was easily frustrated and quick to anger. The first time that Samantha witnessed one of Oscar's like crazy tempers was when they were driving, and then Oscar got really angry, took out his gun and shot it through the sunroof, which was like so close to her face, and she was so scared. There was another time where Oscar was really intoxicated, and then he set fire on the floor and then started dancing around the fire. And there's one time where his friends were over, they were drinking, and then Oscar slipped, fell, and chipped his tooth. And because he was so drunk, he had convinced himself that Samantha had literally like just beat him up. And he was so upset, he was shouting at her, and she was so scared, and Oscar would always sleep with a gun next to him. And then that night, Samantha took the gun and hid it, and she was just waiting for him to finally fall asleep. And when he did, she was so relieved that, you know, she had just basically just like made it through the night without Oscar having done anything to her. And according to her, the night of the South African Sports Awards, the night where Oscar and Reeva made their first public appearance together, she thought that her and Oscar were still dating, and a lot of people did too, until she saw Oscar out with Reeva, and she was like, oh, I guess we're not dating anymore. And on Valentine's Day, when news broke out that Oscar had apparently killed his girlfriend, a lot of people thought that it was her. So on like her posts, she received a lot of rest in peace messages, and people would also send her text messages, you know, just saying like rest in peace and things like that. The key moments that happened during the trial, number one, is that Oscar apologized to Reeva's parents, her family, and just everyone that knew her. And he said that ever since the day of the incident, all he kept thinking about was them, and that he was just truly sorry about what had happened. The second thing is that Oscar vomited during the trial. So one of Reeva's pictures accidentally showed up during the trial, and Oscar saw this picture and he just started vomiting. Yeah, in a bucket. He had a bucket at least, but he just started violently vomiting. The third thing is that there was footage shown of Oscar shooting a watermelon. So Oscar took a gun, shot at the watermelon, and then afterwards he said it's as soft as brains, but it's a zombie stopper. And then the prosecutor, Gernal, said to him, did you see what happened to the watermelon? It exploded. That's what happened to Reeva's head. It had the same effect into her head. Take responsibility, Mr. Pistorius. The fourth thing is the messages that I had read out earlier. The fifth thing is that there was a Valentine's Day card that Reeva had written for Oscar that hadn't been opened because I'm assuming they were waiting for Valentine's Day. And Oscar read it out loud in front of the entire courtroom, and this is where Reeva said to him, I think this is the best time to tell you that I love you. The sixth thing is cricket bats versus gunshots. So the court heard recordings of a bat hitting a wooden door as well as gunshots, and they sounded very similar. So it was just saying that the sounds could be gunshots could be mistaken for cricket bats, like a cricket bat tearing down the door. But I don't really understand that because both of them were used on the 14th. So either way, but yes. Number 7 is that Oscar removed his prosthetics and he walked around the courtroom while his lawyer told Oscar's version of events of that day, and it was also just to like spark emotion in the judge and everyone in the courtroom, just to seem like vulnerable without his legs. And yeah, he was like hysterical walking around. He would hold onto the benches, and some people would also like help him walk around the courtroom. A psychiatric test was ordered for Oscar, and this is because the defense's forensic psychologist said that Oscar suffered from generalized anxiety disorder since childhood, and pointed this to his amputation of his legs when he was just 11 months, the divorce of his parents when he was 6, and the death of his mother at 15. The prosecution then requested that he undergo mental observation, and the judge ordered a month-long evaluation, and a panel of 4 doctors found that Oscar suffered from no mental disorders and he knew right from wrong at the time of Reeva's death. A couple of months after the trial had begun, on the 12th of September 2014, Judge Thokozile Masipa found that the prosecution had not proven beyond reasonable doubt that Oscar Pistorius had intended to kill Reeva Steenkamp, so she acquitted him of murder. But she found him guilty of culpable homicide or manslaughter because he had used excessive force and negligence by firing 4 shots at a toilet door knowing that someone was behind it. And after this, he was sentenced to just 5 years in prison. He then went to a maximum security prison in Pretoria for a year, and in 2015 he was released and was said to serve the rest of his sentence on house arrest. But that's not the end of it. Just 2 months after Oscar Pistorius was released and said to serve the rest of his sentence on house arrest, on the 3rd of December, he was found guilty of the murder of Reeva Steenkamp, and the ruling of culpable homicide was overturned. There were 5 judges on the panel, and it was a unanimous decision to find him guilty of homicide. And this is because they said that his defense didn't find a reasonable reason for him having firing 4 shots. And after he was found guilty of murder, he was sentenced to just 6 years in prison. 6 years. But the prosecution appealed the sentence, and after this, Oscar was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, they reduced the time that he had already served in prison or under house arrest, and that meant that he was only going to serve 13 years and 5 months in prison. If you thought that was the end, you are mistaken. Just last year, in November 2021, Oscar Pistorius is up for parole. He was moved to a prison in the Eastern Cape in preparation for meeting Reeva's parents in a offender-victim dialogue or victim-offender dialogue, and this is part of his parole application. And in order for him to have parole, this is literally like compulsory, like you have to do it. And Reeva's dad says that he can't wait to meet with Oscar and speak to him so he can find out exactly what happened on the day of the 14th of February 2013.
I'm gonna miss you all so much. I love you very, very much.
And that's it for today's case. If you guys have any comments, please leave them down below, and please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified every time I upload. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.